This is a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. Now, I don't think I need to tell you that these past 2.5 years have been horrific for many, troubling for some, and traumatic for all. And it hasn't stopped. Although we are in the process of trying to return back to some sense of normalcy, things are still very, very uncertain. What's happening right now? Right now, people are going back to work, and we also have our children transitioning back to school. And that can be anxiety provoking for many, many folks. Some of us have not been away from our children in 2.5 years. We've been homeschooling, having them where they're with us. Our kids, some of our kids haven't even been in a classroom for 2 years. So they have anxiety about going to school, being around others where there's still uncertainty about the pandemic. That can cause us to experience bouts of anxiety, which can interfere with our performance. It can interfere with our work. It can interfere with our school. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to explore how anxiety manifests itself in our children and what we can do about this. Now, you might say, I don't have any kids, so this doesn't apply to me. My children are grown, they're gone, and I don't have anything to do with taking someone to school. Well, I bet you know someone who might have a child who's going away to college, to high school, to middle school, to elementary school, or maybe even you yourself have experienced bouts of anxiety in various aspects of your life. And if that's you, then this show really can speak into your situation. You can learn what anxiety is, how it manifests, and what things you can do to help to control it so that you can live the life that you've been purposed to live. I'm Dr. Erica Holmes, and this is Living Well. So I'm sitting here with my wonderful co-host, Dr. Nisi, and we were thinking about at work, we're often in our office as psychologists, and we gather, though, at the water cooler, and we talk about all kinds of things that are happening in the world today. And we happen to come across this clip on social media that really speaks to our topic for the day. So come on with us to the water cooler. Let's take a look.
Is this not a drill? Everybody go in the corner and be really quiet and still. What do?
Get on the corner and be really quiet and still.
Now show me how you use your bulletproof backpack. Okay, good job. If a teacher says, Weston, you don't need your backpack, let's get in the corner.
I say, no, I need it, it's bulletproof.
Okay, if the police are outside the door but the shooter is in your room and they call out, is anybody in there? What do?
I say, I'm here.
Absolutely not, you don't say a word.
Okay.
If the shooter is in there, you do not say a word. You stay absolutely silent. Okay, you get out of the building. Where do you go? Where do you run?
Outside.
Where outside?
Home.
You run as far away from the school as you can go.
Okay.
Mom will find you.
Now that's just sad.
Can you imagine the 5-year-old baby? These are the things that's on his mind. He has to go to school and think about, whether or not he's safe. I'm like, you got to teach your child so many drills about active shooters. This is what we've come to now?
Yeah, it just made me think about, I remember growing up in the 70s in California. And, I remember we were taught stop, drop, and roll if there's a
Right.
fire, right?
Right.
Right. There's a fire, kind of like a natural disaster kind of thing. And in California, get up under the table if it's an earthquake or the door frame.
Right,
So those
exactly.
are the two things that we were kind of taught. And now in 2022, we have to teach our babies to beware of people.
Right.
Who might do you harm in school, which is supposed to be safe.
Absolutely.
And I really can't think of too many other things that are sadder than that idea.
Yeah, I agree. You know, when you think a 5-year-old, 5-year-olds are supposed to go to school thinking about, oh, I get to meet and play with my friends and I get to see my teacher. And they're just excited about all the things that are going to happen in the classroom. But can you imagine the anxiety of a child now? This kid, he now has to think, okay, I learned this rule. Oh, I'm always looking at the door, wondering, is today gonna be the day? Like, this is the mindset of our children, and this is what we're sending them out the door with when they're on their first day of school. And I think that's horrible.
You got the kid, and then you have, as a parent,
Right.
letting your baby go to a place where you are assuming, believing that it's safe. Like, you have to. In order to leave your child at daycare, in order to leave them at school, you have to believe that they're going to be safe and protected, or you couldn't walk out the door.
You couldn't. You'd be sitting outside in your car, we're sitting there waiting.
Right.
And nobody can do that.
Exactly. So now I have to, in my mind, I'm not even a safety expert, but I have to figure out how to create a curriculum to teach my child how to be safe in this place where I am not, where I'm far from him. And if we think about the number of shootings that have happened in the United States, the school shootings, and even the last one that just happened in Texas, and how long parents had to wait outside before the police went in. So the police, okay, we're not even getting to the fact that the police didn't do their job, but then parents are waiting outside to, is it my child? Was it my child?
Exactly.
Where's my child? And even if my child is still alive, how are they feeling in it? Like, there's just so much that a parent has to manage just to be able to take their baby to school for the first day.
For the very first day, exactly. Anxiety provoking.
And we all know that anxiety, right, in the parent is going to manifest in the child,
Anxiety in
because
the
the
child.
child picks up cues,
Absolutely.
from their parents. But,
Absolutely.
I also look at this clip, and another thing that kind of came up as I was watching it was, so you have this little boy, and we look at him, this little innocent little boy, and the mom has to teach him about how dangerous the world is, even in places where he's supposed to be safe, where there's a presumed safety. And it also made me think about, if I look at bringing race into this, this has been kind of the history of Black parents as well, where we have to, in some ways, shatter our child's innocence around their skin color when we teach them about interactions with the police.
Absolutely.
Right? We have to take away that what we try to instill, you're beautiful,
Yes.
You are capable, you're competent, you're just as good as anyone else. But we know that when they get a certain age, we have to sit down and have a conversation and say that the world might not believe this of you.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like the same thing. Now, this child is 5. Most of us don't have those conversations around the police with our children when they're 5, but there's still this shattering of innocence. And
that's right.
to me, is like this overall theme. There's this shattering of innocence where we have to teach our children that the world is not safe and the world is not going to love you like I love you.
Exactly. And how disheartening to think at 5. You don't even have the luxury of having that innocence and feeling like you're safe. It's a hot topic. It is definitely a hot topic.
It's a hot topic. And, another aspect of it is, and what are schools going to do? Because is this something that parents should be teaching? Or is this something that should fall into the idea, what was it, back in the early 1900s when we were afraid of the invasion of Russia and they had the sirens to notify us of a nuclear attack, right? And then we get to, again, stop, drop, and roll for fires and get under the table for earthquakes. And, in other parts of the country, there are tornado warnings and hurricane warnings. And the school teaches the children what to do in cases of these kind of natural disasters. So is it the school's responsibility to now teach children how to respond to an active shooter?
Well, now, Dr. Holmes, you're going to turn into a whole nother water cooler conversation because I mean, this idea of the school shootings is just a personal opinion. We shouldn't even be having these conversations. The issues around gun laws and stuff like that, we shouldn't even be having that. So, we tread on, dangerous territory. But at the same time, we're talking about the safety of not just our children, but the safety of people, period. But especially the most vulnerable, our babies.
But until we figure out what to do with gun laws, gun regulations, and types of guns and who can have a gun, and this continues to happen at our schools, regardless of age, from elementary to high school, should this be part of the school curriculum?
It looks like it's going to have to be. Because, the politicians can't seem to figure it out. So in the meantime, the schools may very well have to take it upon themselves and make it a curriculum just to keep the babies safe.
Now, this is what's interesting to me. So yes, maybe the schools will do that. But look at the things that the schools have kind of taken out, right? So the schools won't talk about religion.
Right.
They talk about religion. The schools have taken out controversy around teaching critical race theory, which is our history. But we're going to talk about sex because the schools now have sex education. So now they're teaching our kids sex. Now they're going to teach them about guns and gun safety. They teach them about drugs. So they teach them about all of these quote unquote negative dangers of life, but not some of those things that are protective, like religion, belief in a higher power, spirituality, not teaching about an accurate representation of United States history.
Right.
But there's so many other things that they're teaching our children that they're taking out of the hands of parents.
Sad day.
It's a sad day. And this is where we are, but we expect our children to be ready to learn.
Oh, but of course. Exactly.
I don't know if I was sitting in my office believing that a disgruntled employee was going to come in with a gun, if I'd be able to respond to that email correctly. I don't know. I'm just saying, this is just me.
You're too anxious.
Exactly.
You're too anxious. You can't even concentrate. You can't even focus.
You're looking at the door.
Exactly.
You're looking at the door.
Again, going back to, now this is how we're thinking as adults. Can you imagine the undeveloped mind of a 5-year-old? They don't even have the capacity nor the mental strength, the mental resources that we have as adults. And yet they have to manage this. This 5-year-old, I think that was just so disheartening. That's what just continued to capture me about that video. Is the baby. Being excited about the first day of school, and this is what he has to go to school with.
And as we are, filming this show and in California, schools are going back in session. These are the things that we need to be thinking about and helping our children prepare to go back. And as we think about anxiety, as we think about children, as we think about some of the things that are going on in the world today, I think at this point we need to bring in some help.
You know what? You're right.
So I think we need to go on and add an expert to this conversation.
Let's bring him on.
Let's get ready for that.
Yes.
Now, heading back to school this year can be anxiety-provoking for both parents and children. Uncertainty about the pandemic, the uptick in hate crimes, meeting academic expectations in the classroom or online or in hybrid formats, managing peer groups, and even navigating loud crowds in school hallways can be quite overwhelming. Now, here to unpack all of this for us is Mr. Sega Worku, a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in parenting and child psychotherapy. Thank you for joining us, Sega. I can call you Sega, right?
Yes, you can.
Given that we work together, I'm
Yes.
glad that that's not a problem.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming and joining us. And I guess I want to just kind of start off by thinking about or talking about what's happening for parents and children as they transition back into the classroom. I know some people went back last year for kind of short, brief periods of time, but now we have another variant that seems to be coming every day. Some school districts wear masks, some don't, some it's out. I mean, there's a lot. So what's happening for parents and children at this time?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. This whole transition, even though it's part of life, especially for students, because every year everything changes. With it comes anxiety, which is part of a natural experience that they have. And usually people, when they talk about anxiety, it's hard for them to differentiate between what is an okay anxiety versus out of control anxiety. And so in general, anxiety is when what we feel inside is kind of comes out or shows up in behavior. So it could be a heart rate race, it could be sweating, it could be just like I'm anxious right now sitting here with you guys, or any of those stuff that makes that transition a little bit challenging. So even though this is a normal transition, especially for younger kids and parents as well, this year or this last couple years has become even more difficult because of all the reasons that you've expanded on. So it means we have, we students and parents will experience a little bit more difficult or more severe kind of anxiety, which is expected. But at the same time, the good news is there's things that they can do to manage their anxiety. Yeah.
You know, I often like to think about it as kind of simply put, that depression is kind of that living in the past, and that anxiety is really kind of living in the future, that unknown. And as children are preparing to go back to school and we're not over the pandemic and there are things happening in the government, there's this unknown or fear of the unknown.
So it means if we know that, then we should be prepared better. So just because things are difficult, just because things are different, does not mean we're hopeless or there's nothing we can do. It means we have to take responsibility and start preparing early. We always say prepare your kids to go back to school by giving some kind of structure. Well, now you need to start it maybe a few weeks before school starts and have them in a routine where getting up in the morning is not as difficult anymore, because chances are they're so used to staying up late, it will be difficult. It could be, after being on the screen for so long, suddenly you tell them, no, they're not going to be in it, and you're going to send them to school. It's going to be very difficult. So I think we know this. We know life is difficult for the kids and also for the parents. So the more we manage our anxiety, the more we prepare ahead of time, the better transition we can have.
That makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So, Sego, when you talk about, when we talk about children going back to school and preparing them, how does that differ from, let's just say, elementary school versus, middle school versus high school, when we think developmentally about the children? Does that vary from different, age ranges?
I mean, definitely it will be different from, the different age groups. I know one thing is, in general, there are this general principles that will apply to everyone. When it comes to anxiety, how you rest, your sleep, or what you eat, or how you take care of yourself, it really goes across board. But the way it shows up is different. So for the younger kids, usually the separation is hard. The separation of not being with their parents. And it's not just hard for the kids, it's hard for the parents too. We have a lot of parents, after they drop their kids in elementary school, they hang around. They have to be told it's okay, you can leave, And in this environment, it makes it even so much more difficult. Like you mentioned, there's so many news in the schools of the shooting and everything else. So without knowing down deep inside, that anxiety is more, even for parents. So those kids need more assurance. They need to be reminded of their success of, maybe it could be the daycare that they went to or the last year's success that they had. So the kids would have a little bit inbuilt confidence. Whether if it's elementary or even the older kids, I would say parents really need to manage their own anxiety. I think kids believe more what they see than what they hear. If we ourselves are not, if we don't have our anxiety under control, then we kind of pass that on over to them, which can be way too much, especially for the younger ones. So many things you can do. I mean, for the little ones, even as far as holding their school bag and walking around, getting used to it. If they have a new lunch box, do they know how to open it and close it? And all those little practices will somehow ease some of their anxiety. When we go to the middle age kids, then it's a whole different story there. Middle school is, they're transitioning to a different school, or some people have actually moved around the country this last summer. because of the living situation, then we have even more anxiety and challenge that we have to face. So the middle schoolers may not want to say much. They emotionally hold back. They'll be quiet. It's not because they don't have anything to say, they just don't know how to bring it out. So I think it's good to have some quiet time with them, to take them out for coffee, just for a walk, and give them that freedom to try to share their fears. Most of them, they don't know it. They're concerned about having friends. They're concerned about many things. So hearing that reassurance from their parents, that they're beautiful, that they're smart, that they're loved, that they're cared for, is enough for them to know to ease that anxiety. But to push them to talk does not work for that age group.
No good, huh?
Yeah. And then, of course, when we go to the high school students, it's a whole different story. Now we have a big body, but the brain is still developing. So for them, usually they want to talk, but sometimes what they say may not even make sense. And they don't want to be corrected. They don't want to be advised. They just want you to be quiet and just let them vent. So I think for parents to know that that's a good way to even, for those age group, it's a good way to manage their anxiety. So if parents, if your teenager just wants to talk and just talk about everything else, just let them. Don't try to manage them. Don't try to give advice. They're old enough, but they're not there yet. So they need to start hearing advice from others as well. And of course, the last one is the college age group. You've gone through it,
Yes.
That's a whole different. Now we have adults, but that first year, especially going to college, can be so stressful. And mostly it's the unknown. It's not about not knowing themselves. It's more what's going to be out there, who's going to be my friend, what's my roommate. And hopefully most of the college age groups, they already know these things because of the colleges have shared a lot of information. But I think just reminding them that you're there for them, that they can call anytime, reminding them about the winter break coming up, that may be a chance to go see them or for them to come and see you. So it's almost like you said, it's not the past, it's more the future. The anxiety is about the future. And part of it is, especially for Christian families, is to really lean on our Bible, on the Word of God. And there's a lot of verses that as a family or the kids can practice. We have Isaiah 41:10 to say, be afraid, because I am with you. And to just keep repeating those verses that really centers us to who we are and not to be lost in what goes on in the environment. So yes, for the different age group, they have developmentally, they have different issues. But one thing for sure, parents, the more you manage your own anxiety, it doesn't matter what happens, you'll make it even better. So that's what I would say.
That's helpful.
Yes, you
Very
said a lot of things that kind of resonated. I love that, high schoolers have big bodies, but their brains are still developing. I like that because a lot of times parents and other adults will see a child who's 15, 16, 17, let's say it's a boy and he's really tall, or a girl, she's really developed, and they expect from them things that you would expect from an adult because they look more adult. But we have to remember that their brains are still developing. I also like that you said that, the children, it's like what you would see. And I often say that behavior is the language of children. Behavior is the language of children, and we as adults need to learn how to listen, right? And so many times parents might want to discipline a child for behavior where the child doesn't have the words to say what's wrong, and their behavior is showing it. They're behaving differently. They're not listening. They're not paying attention, and so the parent becomes mad, and they see it as an act of defiance, or they take it personally, where it's really the child is trying to tell you that something is wrong, and we're not listening. And sometimes it might be, as a parent, because of our own anxiety or what our own feelings of being overwhelmed, that we don't even have the bandwidth, or we don't even recognize in ourselves that we're not doing well. We're struggling as well. So, really being able to listen to our children, and as they get older and are able to talk, as you said, with high schoolers, like the stuff that they want to talk about, most of us are like, we don't have time for that.
Yep.
Right? We don't have time to talk about that. But we need to make the time and just let them talk about whatever it is rather than correcting them or trying to get them on a subject that we want to. So a lot of good nuggets there. I also like that you brought in, like, repeating scripture, like what are some of the things that we can do to kind of help ease anxiety. So I like that you brought that in. I know when my son was in high school, we would do affirmations every morning, and you know, before he got out of the car, even though he hated it, and it didn't matter to me. I would have him say, today is a good day, I can and I will.
Yeah.
And he had to repeat that. He didn't want to, but I'm the mama. And I'll never forget that he was in college and I was having a bad time for a minute. And I was talking to him on the phone and he was like, Mom, repeat after me. And he had me say it. And I was like, so you were listening, even though I almost had to choke you to get you to say it. No, not really, almost.
Yeah.
But
Those are, especially I think with high schoolers, one thing that we have to remember with teenagers is many of the stuff that they're faced with, it's their first time.
Right.
They haven't faced those things. So it's not about getting it right, it's about them not getting stuck.
Right.
So if we can encourage them to keep pushing and to keep trying, even if they fail, that they can get up and build that resiliency, it's great. And with the college students, one thing I forgot to mention is, you know, help them find what the resources are in school, in the school. It could be a mental health counseling, academic counseling, student services. There's so much in schools that it really amazes me how many kids would finish going to college and have no idea that they could have gotten the help right there in their school. It's free, it's available. So do that research with them, at least let them know. And if when they're ready, they can use it.
Right. That's a good point. So, Sega, we're talking about the resources that are there, and you know what are developmentally how what we can expect with our children. But what are like some of the red flags? Like what are some behaviors that parents might see, or even that maybe that young adult might see that will tell them, you know what, I need some help. Like how will they know when it's time to really seek some help?
So as I mentioned earlier, now if I'm anxious already, so what I see can make me more anxious. That makes me feel like this is a big problem. So first, first thing to do is to calm myself down as a parent. So then, as we said, anxiety is part of the normal transition, knowing the context we're in with all the crime or the COVID scare. There's so much stuff. To keep that in mind and to give the freedom for kids to be nervous, it's okay to normalize it for them. The problem is whenever those behaviors interfere with our day-to-day life. You know, when that anxiety becomes so much that the kid can't get out of their bed, or they visibly start shaking, or they can't walk into the school, or the parent start getting nervous and they just don't know how to even going to work and not being able to focus because of the fear of what will happen. So whenever that anxiety starts interfering with our day-to-day life, that's when you'd say, okay, I need to get help. That's when you should reach out for help and figure out what to do. And I mean, along those lines, what are the things that we can do is the question. So I would say for parents, definitely to educate themselves about what anxiety is. There's so much information out there to read about it, to know themselves, to remember how they handled their high school days, so they can learn from that. And at the same time, to reach out to other parents, because sometimes what's abnormal is what does not exist, right? If all the kids at that age are experiencing the same behavior, you know there's some normalcy there. But talking to other parents, if you feel like your child's behavior is a little bit out of line, that tells you something. And the other one is teachers. They're with those kids all day long. So when a teacher raises a concern, to take it seriously and to really take an advantage of that information and start getting help for them. But of course, as therapists, we know counseling is one of the best things for kids because, like you said, behavior is a language for kids.
Yes.
Play is also a language
Yes.
for kids.
Yes.
Yes.
So in the therapy room, we know when they're playing board games, they're just not playing. They're actually talking. They're
Right.
sharing a lot of their feelings they're projecting it into the play therapy or whatever we're doing. So seeking counseling early on is the best preventative intervention. Unfortunately, by the time people come to us, they've waited
Yeah.
too long.
Yes.
And the problem has become much more than it should be. So I would say definitely seek out for counseling, seek out for other parents, have a network of people around you, lean on to your faith. There's a lot of verses and a lot of information that we can use that keeps us going throughout the day. So abnormal means I cannot keep moving on.
Right.
So that's when to make that distinction. Yeah.
And that distinction, I think, is so, it's so important because, as you said, you want to be able to get in there and do interventions as early as possible. And I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier. You talked about resources on college campuses and that students have. But I know that in part of your long, illustrious career that you actually oversaw mental health services in a school district, a K-12 school district.
Yes.
And so I know that we're in Los Angeles, California, Inglewood to be specific, but we're in Los Angeles County, a large city. And I know that some major cities have therapists or resources within the district that parents could kind of tap into. Would you happen to know how a parent might go about finding out if their district office offers services or if there are people on campus?
Yeah, definitely. So the school counselors are the best people to have a good relationship with. They know the resources that are out there. Some people or some families may think the school counselor is the one who's going to do therapy with their kids, but really not. They're busy with the school calendar, scheduling, behavioral issues. But building a relationship with that school counselor, asking them what is available within the school or in the community, you'll be surprised how much information there's out there. Definitely, if there's counseling within the school, is the best way because they're already there. So it really, yes, it does take them out of a class maybe once a week for 1 hour, but that consistent relationship that they can build with that counselor, by the end of the year, they'll be surprised how much they can grow. Even the older kids, sometimes when we work with kids, especially in the special classes where these kids have a lot of behavioral problems, when they come to the counseling room, they're totally themselves. They can cry, they can talk, but before they go out, they have to put all the makeup and everything together, so they have to have that facial expression. So I think it's a safe place where they can explore, express their thoughts, feelings, so they can come up with their solutions. It's not about giving advice, it's about empowering them to come up with their solutions. So I would say definitely talk to the school counselor, if not the principal, or the teachers too, but the teachers sometimes are too busy with grades. So definitely, go to the school counselors,
Right. So with school, we're at the top of the school year. What's the best advice you would give to parents right now who have children returning to campus and trying to deal with this anxiety? What's the best advice you have for parents to prepare?
Boy, that's a tough one. That's there's so many things that we are learning. Even as professionals, we may be able to advise others, but when we go through it ourselves, we understand what a humbling experience that is.
And I know you've gone through it.
Oh yes, I've gone through it enough times that I've learned my lesson more from my kids than even the school. But one thing I would say is for parents not to compare their kids with others.
Oh,
I think that's one of the toughest things that as parents we go through.
Again,
So it's almost like having flowers. Somebody gives you two different kind of flowers. You have a rose and then you have a tulip. Can you imagine trying to make the tulip into a rose or trying to make the rose into a tulip? You actually will destroy it. You may cut it all you want, you can do whatever, but there's no way to do that. But the plants by themselves, you don't need to convince them to be beautiful. Like they already, God has put in them in their seed that they want to be beautiful. What they need is love, the soil, the sun, water. If they get that on their own, it's already it's created in that way, so they want to be beautiful. So one of the pressure that I see with parents is they've made their decision that if things don't go this way, then they make the conclusion that my kid is going to die. I mean, literally, that's the end conclusion.
Yes.
So to pull back, to be grounded in their own faith, into themselves, manage their anxiety, and accept each kid for who they are.
Right.
And work with others to see how they can make them the best that they can be. This anxiety of going back to school, this anxiety with the environment around the world can make this fear too much. Sometimes the fear of the fox can be bigger than the fox.
Right.
You know, the fear of this transition can be bigger than what it is. So to relax, not to compare kids with others, but to just go ahead and invest in them and say that, let them know that they're loved and they have an identity. That's what they need is, one, I know I am loved. I may not feel it around school, maybe it's a new environment, but I know that my mom loved me. My mom reminded me that it was gonna be okay this morning. If they can focus on that and let go of this comparing or competition, that I think that can take them a long way.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, same here. I mean, that is so powerful, especially about not comparing, because I know that sometimes as parents, when they start to compare, the parent can place an expectation on a child.
Yeah.
And just placing an expectation on a child, well, sure, we want them to excel and do well, but parents can have their own expectation, and it might not be something that their child is able to meet. And then that in and of itself can cause anxiety for a child. So I love the fact that you said, don't compare them. Just allow them to be and let them know that they're loved so that they can fully develop into who they are. That's priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nurture your rose.
Yeah.
Nurture your tulip. Nurture your orchid.
That's it.
Yeah.
And allow it to be beautiful. I always say that comparison is a thief of joy.
Amen. Yep.
Comparison is a thief of joy. Thank you so much for being with us at this time, Mr. Sega Worku. Now, for those of you who are watching us, we always like to leave you with a tool or a tactic or a strategy or a resource that you can use in your everyday life. So today we want to let you know about a new 988 crisis line that just launched in July. Now, 988 offers 24/7 access to trained crisis counselors who can help people experiencing mental health distress. That could be thoughts of suicide, mental health or substance use crisis, or any other kind of emotional distress. You can call or text 988, or you can chat at 988lifeline.org. You can call, text, or chat for yourself, or if you're worried about a loved one who is in need of crisis support. With that, we want to thank you for joining us, and until next time, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, 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 change.